If ever there was a season to cultivate more emotional intelligence, it is this one. We see examples all around us of the impact of low emotional intelligence in our workplaces, in our school systems, in our politics, and in our personal lives too, perhaps. But it is possible to increase one's emotional intelligence through practice. What some think of as spiritual practices, I like to think of as practices of connection. Things like mindfulness, self reflection, empathy for others, and caring about the larger world around us are all also goals that many religious traditions hope to cultivate in their followers. So perhaps there is a symbiotic relationship between emotional intelligence and spiritual maturity. Developing one bolsters the other, and perhaps impeding one limits the other as well. Similarly, how well we are equipped as individuals is interconnected to the communities we exist within. Our families, our congregations, and our larger cultures all have an impact whether they promote or stifle emotional intelligence. But we can make choices about who we interact with most and where we spend our emotional energies. We can choose to center practices that promote greater self awareness and emotional depth. We can choose to center communities and relationships that reinforce these things we are trying to cultivate in ourselves. Like when we choose a new practice, working out, reading more, volunteering in the larger community, there are people and places that we can choose to prioritize that help us keep these new practices. And there are people and places we can choose to minimize. Especially when we are starting out or particularly challenged to keep to our goals, we need to maximize those around us that hold similar goals and will help us keep them. Now is a time that stress and anxiety are on the rise, and the past few months have been a very long period of collective trauma. These are times that reduce emotional intelligence in all of us. And it is also a key time to be aware of the need to practice connection a bit more than normal. We might need to take some centering breaths before we respond to that email or text message, to think about why someone might be acting in a certain way before we react to them, to reflect for a moment before we unmute ourselves on that Zoom call, and to listen more deeply to our own feelings that we may be avoiding. When we allow ourselves time to pause, we also listen better to the other people in our lives. I was reminded earlier this week that it was the second anniversary of my ordination and installation as Bucksmont's minister. During that service, the congregation covenanted to support each other through the work ahead, and that together we would be moved by love, share lifelong journeys of growth, wonder, and healing, nurture wholeness in society and spirit, and create a community of justice and compassion. I accepted that ministry, and so did the gathered congregation. It is ours to do together, and it sounds an awful like a description to develop emotional intelligence too. When we say we will be moved by love, we must be able to listen to our own heart's longing to be so moved. In order to share lifelong journeys of growth, wonder, and healing, we need to be committed to one another for an extended period of time and be vulnerable enough to share honestly with each other. In order to nurture wholeness, we must be willing to share where our wounds are and seek out those who will help us as we also seek out those we are capable of helping. And a community that is both just and compassionate must be aware enough to see and correct for injustice. To be truly compassionate, you need to understand the needs of others and create a space together that promotes a community of healing that, even when imperfect, moves toward betterment whenever possible. It is this sort of vulnerability I think we need, and I think Rilke was referencing with the words, ultimately, it is upon our vulnerability that we depend. If we hold ourselves invulnerable, we must also hold ourselves apart. There can be times when this is a form of survival, but when the immediate danger passes, or we are able to be surrounded by a different community, becoming vulnerable again is a necessary ingredient of growth and healing. Practicing connection with others is intimately tied with practicing emotional intelligence, which I am thinking of as more of a compass toward growth rather than a map. Each landmark along the way may not be noted, but if you stray off course, the compass can guide you back. It isn't like a GPS either, which tells you the exact turn by turn you need to arrive at the destination. Developing emotional intelligence helps develop a sense of true north and how far off you are on a given trek. And it helps you be a guide for others, not to fix them or tell them exactly how you got to where you are, but instead to accompany them on a shared journey for a time and to give them the necessary tools to help find their own way onward. The ability to find our own way rather than being told the way is what makes us resilient during turbulent times, which is all we can hope for, to get better at finding our way, to be helped by those we meet who know a bit more than we do, and help others become a little less lost than they were before we met them on the path. May we all listen for that pull in a better direction and help to create the quiet needed for others to hear it too. So may it be.